The Bernina 880 Stitch Designer with Susan Fears.
Hi, I'm really glad you could join us for our Stitch Designer tutorial. This is a new feature for the Bernina 880 and it is very, very exciting. So let's take a look at all the things we can do. The 880 Stitch Designer, the icon is the one you see circled on the screen of the little pencil. So what can you do with the Stitch Designer? I want you to think about these possibilities. You can freehand draw just by using your stylus or your touch pen or your fingertip. You can modify existing stitches. Instead of freehand drawing, you can click in a series of points. You can create brand new stitches. You can design in 9mm width stitches or less, but you can also design sideways motion stitches which have an unlimited width limitation when you are designing. So that is a very fun way to get larger motifs. Perhaps maybe you want to design a freehand quilting design that you want to put into an area. This is a perfect place to do that. You can save your stitches to the machine in the personal program folder. You also can save your stitches to a USB stick. You can import stitches from a USB stick so you can trade stitches with friends that you are creating stitches with that also have 880s. And you can also import stitches from the Bernina embroidery software. Some stitches may not be in the machine and you could either bring them over or create new ones in the Bernina embroidery software. Your creative stitches are limited to 2,000 stitches, but that's a lot. So let's see what else. So this is just a picture of the screen, and these are some of the tools that you have access to. So starting from the right side of the screen, working our way down, you'll see a little 9mm lock. So when that has the white box around it, it means that you're designing within a 9mm limitation. The hand is more like a panning. It moves the view of the screen so that you can see more if your stitch is bigger than the immediate drawing area. Move is a great way for you to move individual points so they can be selected and you move them. Draw, those are your drawings. That's how you're going to draw a stitch. That is the default when you open up your Stitch Designer. Scrolling, you can go through the stitches with the up and down arrows. The number or the count will also give you the active stitch position and the number of stitches. Down below that is a selection area, so you have the option of selecting a variety of points in the stitch. So we'll take a look at that in just a minute. And then on the upper left-hand corner, you see undo and redo. This is fantastic because this is a great way to be able to work. And there are 20 levels of undo and redo. Moving over from our previous icons we just went over, to start a new stitch, a fresh page, you select the new icon. Anytime you open up your Stitch Designer screen, it brings with it the stitch that's in your stitch altering area. So to clear or to get a new page, you select New. You have mirror imaging tools left and right. You also can draw a stitch and then turn into a triple stitch. The play button allows you to watch the stitch being sewn on screen just by playing it. Gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. And then you have the option to activate Snap to Grid, which will in effect give you a better way to draw. Continuing on, you have a delete key, so if you want to delete things that are highlighted or your last stitch, you can. Mirror image up and down, a duplicate function, and an invert function, which we'll take a look at in just a few minutes. And then there is also zoom, which you'll find very handy when you're working on designing stitches that are larger than the 9mm. Looking at the selection icon does have a little triangle at the bottom indicating that there are other options within that selection area. So to select everything, you have the select all. Then you can select some, which allows you to trace through the design and select just a portion. And then there's also just the current selection, so that would be maybe one stitch. And those are some of the handy tools that you'll be able to use when you are creating with the Stitch Designer. There are 1,764 stitches built into the 880, but you can have more by creating your own using the Stitch Designer. So let's take a look at what creating stitches with the Stitch Designer looks like. So Here's our pencil. This is what opens up our Stitch Designer screen. This is the straight stitch that was previously on the screen, so this is what I start with. To get a new fresh page, I just select New, and now I can freehand draw. So I can create with my stylus or my fingertip and freehand draw. I also can click in a variety of points just by tapping on the screen. You may be noticing that this lighter blue area that I'm drawing in, that is your 9mm lock. So I have this area on, so I can't go beyond that 9mm. So this keeps my stitches nice and even. Now, this is not the most attractive stitch, so let's say that you'd like to create something with a little bit more precision. This is when your Snap to Grid can come in quite handy. So by activating Snap to Grid, I can just touch in the area of a grid point and it snaps to that grid. So perhaps you want to create a cityscape, and you can even make diagonal lines. Then you can do that just by working with your Snap to Grid functions. So that makes that very, very simple. One of the other things that you can do is incorporate a stitch. Now let's say that you love your cityscape. What can you do with it here? This is not where you're going to stitch from. You're going to select the check mark. This is your stitch out screen. So this is where you would begin to stitch and see if you like it. You can also edit stitches that already exist in the machine, such as perhaps maybe this little flower, our little tulip. So if I take that into the Stitch Designer, you can see it's a 9mm stitch and it takes up most of the area. But if I turn that lock off and I zoom out a little bit, because I want to give myself a little bit more drawing space, I can select points just by selecting Move and then tapping on the stitch that I want to adjust, and I can move just by selecting these little pieces. And so I can create or adapt the stitch to be the stitch that I need it to be. So right now I've just readapted this stitch. If I want to select everything, I use my selection tool and select all. When something turns blue, it is all selected. So if I want to duplicate this, I select Duplicate, and let's zoom out a little bit more so you can see exactly what we've done. And I'm going to select the Move View of the screen, and now we see everything. So my duplicated stitch is following right after the original. What I'm going to do is select Invert or Mirror Image. It will be Mirror Image first, and then we'll invert. And now that it's right on top of each other, I'd like to move it. So you can also use the multifunction nods to move the stitch so that it is in the alignment that you need. Now what you are seeing is the stitch on your graph paper, but you're also seeing the preview of the stitch across, in this little preview area. And one thing to notice is that you only see the one stitch. So that tells me that in order for this to advance, I don't really have enough stuff going on. Just to maybe show you that, let's do a play. So this is our play, and I saw where the stitch started, and now we're playing out our little tulip, and we're stitching here, and now we're going to start stitching it in reverse, and the tulip is going to stitch out, and then it's going to end just where it started. So if my needle position is where the white dot is, if it's going to start over sewing again, it's going to stitch over top of itself, which is not what I want it to do. I want it to continue on. So I'm going to select the pencil, and I'm going to also select, I don't really need to select Snap to Grid. I'm just going to start bringing some points down. And as you see, as I move that needle position to the end of this line, you see in my preview screen how I get the rest of the stitches. So this is what it would look like when you're ready to stitch this out on your fabric. So you have moved your needle position just by adding those extra little travel stitches in your stitch. So you've designed this and you love it, and now you're going to check to confirm you could stitch this out. One thing that you should notice is that on your stitch width, you see the width of the stitch in millimeters as well as the length of the pattern. Also take a look at what your presser foot selection is suggesting for you. And it is selecting the 40C foot, which is your sideways motion foot. So even though it you haven't stitched this yet, it knows this is a wide stitch and that the best foot to use is going to be 40C. So that's the one you would want to attach. You stitch it out, you love it, you want to keep it because you have lots of projects this is going to go on. Let's save this. So you want to select your personal program. We're going to select the arrow of the arrow going into the file folder. This is always save. And you have 4 folders that you can save designs to. So pick a folder that you're going to save all of your created stitches to. That's what I've done on my 880. I always save them into one folder, and then I don't have to worry whatever else is in the other 3. I know all my Stitch Designer stitches are in a specific folder. So pick the one you want. When you have the stitch, the folder selected, the stitch is not saved until you select or touch on the highlighted stitch. And now it has been saved away. So that is a great way of being able to save the stitches that you love and design. Now, I also mentioned that you can take things to and from a USB stick. So let's say that I want to take a design or save it to a USB stick. I still select Save, but when I select the transition, I have a USB option of which I then can go to and save my stitch to the USB stick. If I want to get something out of my USB stick, then again, I'm going to go to Personal Program. I'm going to select Retrieve or get the design out. Select the transition. This is where you will see the USB stick. And now this little blue stitch is from the Bernina embroidery software. This is a candle wicking stitch, and I've imported this into my sewing machine because this is a stitch I do not have. So let's take a look at what this would do in the Stitch Designer. So this is it in the Stitch Designer. I'm going to get a little bit larger so I can see. And I also want to see what's really going on with this stitch. You may notice you see the candle wicking knot, but you don't see lots of them. So what that is telling you, and if you are starting to learn to look for where the white dot is, this is where the needle point is ending, is right here. So if it were to start stitching again, it would be right on top of each other. So just like we did with the tulip, we're going to select the pencil, and I'm going to start adding some stitches that then advance the needle position so that I can have some spacing, or the needle has time to move to get to an area before it starts stitching its next candle wicking stitch. This would be the stitch that I have now created. I would select my check mark, and I would save this away to my personal program or to my USB stick, depending on where I want to go with this. And you will notice that foot number 20C is the selected or the recommended foot. I have stitched this out, and foot 20C works very nicely. You do need to use the lightest weight bobbin thread that you can use, such as a bottom line thread. That seems to work really, really nice. So those are just a couple of the great things that you can do with the Bernina embroidery software, and I hope that you will have fun playing with that, because there's really a lot more than 1,764 stitches. There is a lot more depending on your level of creativity, but it also gives you the advantage of being able to design stitches for the project that you have in mind. I hope you'll enjoy working with the Bernina Stitch Designer.